Interview with Phyllis Hershey at her home in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania on July 30th, 2002 with Jen Elliott as part of the Cumberland County Women During World War II Oral History Project. Okay.
I wrote some things down so I wouldn't forget.
Can you tell us a little about what life was like before the war began?
Well, I was in high school, and it was my senior year, and I mean, I hadn't even thought of leaving my hometown or anything, but as the war went on, they gave us civil service tests in high school, and I passed, very easily, and I had planned to go into nursing and, go away to school, and when it came closer to the time, well, it was getting to graduation, I had a cousin that was working in Middletown at the air depot, and her husband was in the service, and she said, why don't you come down with me for the summer and work? She said, you'll have enough money to go away to school. It sounded like a great idea, so that's what I did. I went down with her. But before that, in school, the war was going on, and I mean, all the seniors had jobs. We went out during air raids and blackouts and patrolled different things. And we had a day every week that we would make bandages. And, and we had to go to the tallest building in town and watch for planes. Now, we didn't know one plane from another, but to see, it was just kind of training. But we did all of that during our last year in high school. And if you went to one of the schools, and if there was a blackout, you wore a band and you went to the school, and they put you on a team and you went out to certain things, and they would take you in a hearse, and you would maybe go someplace where everybody was injured, pretend and bandage them up and put them in a hearse and bring them back to the school. I mean, it was very exciting. And as we graduated, so many of the boys already went to in the service. They went right from school into the service. In fact, one of them was dead right before we graduated. He went in early, and he was in an accident in the service. It was killed. It was very scary for everybody. But anyway, after I graduated, then I went with my cousin down to Middletown. The next day I got a job. And from then on I was working. And at the time it was called clerk typist, civil service job, and got $1,440 a year. It doesn't sound like much of money, but it was a lot at that time, and it gave me enough money to pay my cousin rent and help pay the expenses, and I sent money home, and I even started saving. I couldn't believe it that I could save money, but it was pretty neat, When I got the job, it was the day after I graduated, and they took me to an office where I was to work with a woman counselor, and she was so nice. I thought she was ancient, but she really wasn't that old. Probably only in her 50s at that time, but she looked as older than my mother to me. But she was like another mother, so it was real nice. I liked working with her, and she watched out for me in all kinds of ways, and I was like her receptionist. And it was the time when Blue Cross was just really started, and I would collect the money for the Blue Cross. People would line up and come in this office, and for one person to sign up for Blue Cross was 75 cents a month. That was what your hospitalization cost. And for a couple, it was $1.50 a month. And for a family, it was $3.50 for the whole family. So that was pretty nice. But then you see what the wages were, you know. But that's the way it went. And most people paid like 3 months at a time. And we just I wrote out a receipt, you know, and gave it to them. But they were covered for, as soon as anybody was getting married, she'd say to them, now you sign up for a couple because you'll probably be having a baby and you want to be covered, you know, you don't want to be single here. So we did a great thriving business in Blue Cross. Can you imagine the difference? Be incredible. But we were in this office for a long time, and then they took us and put us in a new office, and it was located in the middle of the big cafeteria. I have a picture here of it. This is me here.
Oh.
In that office, there was a man counselor on one end and a woman counselor on the other, and they took care of the draft, anything to do with the draft, and all the classifications of guys in the service. And they did the gas rationing, gas and tires, and then we sold war bonds. And that was my main job, was to be connected with these war bonds. And everybody that, you know, came to work was taking out bonds. Like when we were in high school, we were buying stamps and stuff, but there wasn't anything like that. You bought a bond, you know, 1875, and it was taken off your pay. And then when the bonds were finished being paid for, we would put, like up here it says C, D, E, F. Those were the bonds that were available. And as the people came into the cafeteria to go for lunch, they would stop over and see if they had any bonds. And then they would sign this great big book, and we would give them their bonds. But it was really exciting. But the thing about it is we had to work shifts. And you worked 2 weeks, 7 to 3, and then 2 weeks, 3 to 11, and then 11 to 7, all night long, you know. So every 2 weeks you change shifts. You never got used to sleeping or anything, you know. But it was a really exciting place. I didn't realize, but I mean, I saw hundreds of people every day, you know. It was exciting. And at one end of this place, as you came into work, were time clocks that you had to, you know, punch to come into work and then punch to go out. And in the evening like this, they turned all the lights out, all except where we were. Now the restroom was right here, and there were always 2 or 3 of us in here. But you know, we used to take turns. We wouldn't walk around because it was too dark. And then when it was lunchtime, all the lights would come on. Everybody would rush over from where they were working, you know, and eat and check on their bonds or their rationing or anything like this. So it was very, very busy.
Imagine.
Yeah. And the counselors were very busy, the man and the woman. And, you know, anybody that just got started working would come here to sign up for bonds too. And then if they didn't get all the bonds given out and we were getting them accumulated, they would send me out with them, and I'd go to different buildings to give them out. And you know, there was a great big hangar where all the planes were, and that was really, you know, to me, I was 18. It was so exciting. I was pretty impressed. And you would go to the offices, and they would bring the people in, you know, and they'd sign up for their bonds. And there was a parachute building where you saw how they folded the parachutes, and engine repair where they did the engines, and then test blocks where they tested the engines. And I was thinking too, there was one building, it was called a gunk room, and they took the engines and dipped them in this stuff. It was like not paraffin, but something that preserved them. And then they were put on planes and sent overseas. You know, that's the way they preserved them, so they wouldn't be in danger. I mean, you know, damaged to be shipped out. But that's it. It was a very busy and exciting place. I learned a lot. I don't know. Oh, one day we were in there and a plane, it wasn't lunchtime, but a plane crashed into the cafeteria, into where the food was. And thank goodness nobody was killed. The pilot was killed. The plane was destroyed and the pilot was killed. But they see, it would be where the airport is now, the runways and all. So there were a lot of planes coming and going, you know, stuff like that. But you had said about somebody on a scooter. I went home one weekend and my mother said to me, "What are you doing down there?" She said, "Somebody's up here investigating you." I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "They're going from house to house asking all about your character and everything." I said, "Mom, I didn't do anything." And here, someone was stealing bonds, and we didn't know it. They were disappearing, and they found out it was one of these girls on the scooter. When you said it's about this girl on the scooter, she brought the bonds down from the headquarters to us. She'd take a couple out, and she and her boyfriend, she'd take a couple for men and a couple for women, and they were cashing them. And they finally caught them. But that's what happened. But there were a lot of scooter riders. I don't mean just one. But she I couldn't believe it that I was being investigated. You know, I thought, my goodness. Oh, I tell you too, there in the hangars, they had a lot of midgets working because they could work in the noses of the planes and stuff. There were a lot of them that worked there full time, you know, and they were so happy to have decent, good jobs and really well paid, you know, which was a nice thing. I can't think of what else I want to tell you here for a while, but do you have any questions?
Well, like you answered most of them, but one question I was wondering, there were people working there. Were they all from Pennsylvania, all around? Do you know?
Oh, they were from everywhere. And there were a lot of older people that never worked at anything. Like when I said about this gunk room where they dipped these things, they were all old women and men. I often wondered, the smell in there was so powerful. And I've thought about it, you know, you wonder how that, if it ever affected people. But it was a stinky place. Oh, and while we were in there, in the night, when nobody was in there but us, the guards would bring in prisoners of war from Germany, German prisoners of war, to clean the place. Now, and they were, you know, they had a lot of guards, and they bring these boys in, and they looked like little kids. They looked like my age or younger, some of them, you know. We weren't supposed to look at them or talk to them or have anything to do, and we didn't. You know, we couldn't have talked to them anyway in German, but they would clean all these areas in here. These were all long benches, and people that didn't eat in the cafeteria would come in and sit on those and bring their lunch, have their lunch, you know. But that's what they were cleaning. They would clean the cafeteria, and they got them out of there before the shifts changed, you know, and anybody came in. But I never expected to see that, you know, to see German prisoners of war. But like I said, they look like little kids. I don't know. It it was a lot of fun in one way because there was a lot of chances to date people. But you know, you didn't know who these people were. But my counselor, she showed me what to do. She says, "Come over here, I'll show you. If any of these wise guys want you to go out with them, look it up in here, see what their status is." She said, "See if they're 4F." And she said, "Or you can say, what's your name?" And come over here and look it up and say, "What about Helen and the 3 kids?" You know, it was kind of neat. She taught me that, so I was very careful. I didn't run around too much. And changing shifts, you never knew when you were going to do anything. You were sleeping, you know, a lot in the daytime. I hated that 3 to 11 because it seemed so confining. I mean, you got up in the morning and then you went to work at 3 and got home at 11 and you couldn't go do anything. I didn't mind the 11 to 7. And some of the girls, we would get together and go to a midnight show after the 3 to 11, sometimes go to the movies in Harrisburg. You know, you could do that. And gas rationing was so bad that I hardly ever got home because there wasn't any. I didn't have a car. And my cousin had a car, but she couldn't get gas. Or if you got gas, you might not. You never had a spare tire because they were retreads, and it was dangerous, you know, to go in these cars. Well, anyway, it was exciting, especially to be that young. I don't know if I would have been a lot more sensible if I had been older, but to me, it was a big adventure, you know. I mean, I felt it was important, and then I had a good opportunity, you know. So I worked there at that booth for a long time, and then there were flyers coming out. They needed help in other parts of the base, so I applied for a different job that would pay more, and I got accepted, and I got to be a teletype operator, which was up in the headquarters building, and it was a big room in the basement of this main headquarters, and along the walls were these big machines, and you typed. It would be like Western Union, only it came out in a tape. The stuff came out in a tape, and then you had to proofread it. I mean, every hole meant a different letter or a number, you know, and you had to proofread it. And then you took them over and sent them in these machines to different bases in the world. It could be all over the world, not only the country, you know, and to ships at sea, you sent the stuff, and to air bases like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you know, and everywhere, every one of these big machines represented a different place, and it was really exciting. And then there were about 5 people on a shift, which was one was the supervisor, you know, but if you could type, you could do it, but it had to be so exact because there was a lot to do with numbers, you know, a lot of like orders and parts and all kinds of stuff. And then there was an officer in a separate room there in this place, and he was there to take private, secret messages. He took care of that kind of stuff, or codes, you know. And when we got coded messages in, they gave them to him, and he took care of that. But sometimes when they weren't working, if they were so busy, they would call you and come and get you. In the middle of the night, they'd send a staff car for you to come and help, like the shift was so busy. So it wasn't the fun that it had been down below, but I felt it was really important. I got more money for it, but I never drank coffee before in my life. And they lived on it there, you know, and I learned to drink coffee. I started out with sugar and cream, lots of it, and then I got to black, and I'm still drinking it black. But that was exciting. Oh, and in the meantime, right before I went up there, I met this really nice fellow, and it ended up we got married in about 3 months. I went with him, and my woman counselor liked him, and she approved of him. You know, she checked him out, and we got married in 1946. I graduated in 1943, so 1946 I got married, and there weren't any places to live. It was terrible. I couldn't stay with my cousin anymore because her husband came home from the service. He was out of the service. And this was a fellow that just had come back from the service, the one I married. And we were looking for a place to live, and we couldn't find an apartment or anything. And then the government had housing. And Marion was telling you about my housing at the barracks. Well, I found this the other day. This is where we went to live. These are old Army barracks. And it was in High Spire. Do you know where High Spire is?
Yeah.
It's down next to Middletown.
Oh.
They're not there anymore. They've torn them down. But this is an aerial view that was taken of it. And it was, we got 2 rooms in there. My mother and Dad came to see us, and my mother said, if I made you live like this, you'd cry your eyes out. We didn't have a private bath or anything. And there were, in the middle of these buildings would be a men's restroom and a women's, and 4 toilets, 4 showers and sinks, and that was it. And in the middle of the night, you know, there's no privacy there. You just had to go down there, and that was the bathroom. It wasn't much fun to be just married and living like this. but it was different. We had there weren't any refrigerators. Everybody had a nice box. The old wooden kind of ice boxes that are so valuable now. That's what you got. And it was furnished. You had a table and chairs and a stove. My husband we lived in this end of this one right here. And then right here in the middle would be the bathrooms, and then right where this door is was like a large room, and it had a phone. Nobody had a private phone. There was one phone in there, and that was what you had, you know. And am I talking too much?
Oh, no.
The boys that, some of the men that were in there living, they knew how to fix the phone. They fixed it so that when you made a call, all your money came back. So we could call almost anywhere, you know. But then the phone company would come and fix it again. They'd fix it back, you know. And the guys would fix it again. And the kids were finding out in the neighborhood that this was happening, that the money was coming back. So they were always chasing kids out of the place that didn't belong there because they were after the money. And what you did in this room, it was the beginning of Tupperware. And the ladies would have Tupperware parties. There was nothing else, you know, but most everybody had a Tupperware party now or then. And that was big recreation. But I'm going to tell you about these rooms. We had a kitchen and a bedroom, and they were furnished. They had twin beds in the bedroom. Well, you're just married, you know. And there was the room nothing was as big as this The two rooms together might have been as big as this room, you know. And the walls were like paper. You could hear everything from one room to the next. And they had these ice boxes, and you had to let your door open every day, because if you wanted ice, you weren't there because we were working. And they would just bring the ice in and stick it in. Well, you know, then you had to empty these pans underneath. Well, ingenious men got together, and they came around and they said, "Is this where you want your ice box?" He said, "Yes." And they took and they put a copper pipe in it and drilled a hole right through the floor of the building, so the water ran right under the floor, so that you never had to empty the pan. Wasn't that ingenious? Yeah. Yes. Floor rotted. The buildings probably rotted apart, but the water ran under the buildings, you know.
Wow.
Yeah, very, very ingenious people. And we had, we had our names in for refrigerators and things like that, but there weren't any, you know. They were just, and there weren't any washers and dryers. There was nothing automatic like that. So we bought a washer, a washing machine. And if you wanted to wash clothes, you had to get your washing machine down to the laundry room the night before and stick it in front of these tubs. And then get up, like before you went to work for 7 o'clock, get up and do your laundry, and you put it out in the line. And you might come home and all your clothes would be on the floor, because, I mean on the ground, because somebody else wanted the line, and they would just take the pins out and hang their own stuff up. It was a real cutthroat place, I tell you. Anyway, I worked there until 1950. We lived there. The main thing that we did do, he had taken out bonds all his time in the service. He was in 4 years in the Air Force. And I had started taking out bonds from the minute I got there, and I had a lot of bonds. And we met some very wonderful people. And the three of us, we met two couples, and the three of us built these houses together. 1949, we had bought this land. Middletown was closing. The war was over, and the depot was closing, and we all applied to Mechanicsburg, to the Navy here, and we were hired here. So we came over here, and I did teletype at the base here, and my husband worked here, and three couples. So we bought this land, and we started to build. And if it hadn't been for that bonds, all those bonds, we wouldn't have this house. We started to build, and as we built, we cashed the bonds. Like when the bricks came, we paid for the bricks. When the sand came, we paid for the sand. We did this all the time that the house was being built. And when we were finished, we didn't have a great big mortgage, just what we couldn't afford, you know, to finish it. So that was the way we did it. When we moved in here, we didn't have any furniture, because this little hole in the wall had only. So we had a card table in the kitchen here, and we had a bed. That was it. Yeah. And all this stuff comes a little at a time, one thing at a time. Mostly our parents' junk, and we did a lot of that over. Everything here I have redone. You know, like every piece of furniture, all this stuff, painted all it. That was painted. That was blue when I bought it. Took 3 years to get it that way, back to normal. Daughter, we moved in here in 49. She was born in 50, and so she's 52 years old this year. another son too. Then we had a son. So that's really the story of it all. I quit after I got pregnant. That was 7 years of working for the government. Yeah. My husband's been dead for 20 years, so yeah, it's too bad. He got cancer and he didn't last too long. Died in 1982.
Yeah, my father passed away from cancer.
Really horrible.
I only have one other question.
Yeah.
Is going back, do you remember VE and VJ Day?
Yes. We went to Harrisburg that day and was dancing in the streets. I think we were going together then, and we had a great time jumping around over there, you know. People were everywhere. It was great. We didn't have a car when we got married either. We ended up with an old roadster that had belonged to a veterinarian, and it had extra heavy springs in it. And we moved from that barracks to this house with that little car. We did have a bed before we moved here. And we were coming over the Walnut Street Bridge, which is the one that's in half now. And the mattress fell off the car in the middle of the bridge.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah, we were young and dumb, but we had a good time. So that's about the story of my life.
Okay, going back to when you worked at the depot, how did you and your cousin deal with rationing?
Well, I guess we did all right. There were only the two of us, you know, and I don't have my rationing books or anything. My mother-in-law was a pain in the pip. I shouldn't say that, but they went to the shore. They always went to the shore. My parents never had any money to do anything, but my husband and I went down, and she said to me, "Did you bring your rationing book?" And I thought, "Oh, brother, you know, we were only there for like 2 days." I said to her, "I won't eat any sugar," you know, stuff like this. But we didn't have any problems with it, you know. There was only two of us, and I didn't think it was that bad. And I was a dumb cook anyway. I couldn't. In this apartment, in this barracks, the windows had no blinds or anything, and you couldn't buy anything. And paper drapes were popular. So I bought a pair of paper drapes and it was just like a long closet. And we put a rod up there and a rod in the middle, and I cut the paper drapes in half and put them up there and down here. And then you put your pots and pans in your dishes, and that was it, you know, and your food. And then there was a stove right next and a sink. And one day the wind is blowing with the window open, and the wind blew the paper drape over to the stove. And luckily I was standing there, and I took the rod off and stuck it in the sink, but the smoke was all over, and everybody is so excited in the place, you know. "Is there a fire?" And I put my head out. I said, "I burnt the roast," and that was it. They were all young and dumb, you know, most of us. I don't know if any were dumber than us, but don't feel as you get older that you're different than anybody else, because every generation had it. My kids all going to college and all, I just didn't think they had anything to compare what we went through. You know, it was a crazy time. And Like I said, there was no luxuries. got a refrigerator after we got here, just, you know, just whatever you could get. But things were getting better by that time.
During the war, did you guys can your food, have a victory garden at all?
No, there wasn't any place to do it.
Okay.
No, where we were, there were those in between these buildings. Like there was this little bit of land, and that's where they put the clotheslines for you. But all those, when you think that all those buildings was like this, and this building here was an old schoolhouse, and the woman who ran this whole establishment, she was in there. If you wanted anything or you had any complaints, you know, you went to her. And we learned after a little while it didn't do any of us women any good to complain, because she didn't do anything for us. So we always sent them in, and they could soft soap her and maybe get a new chair or something if we needed it. But she was much nicer to the men. She's an old biddy. And she, you know, she said, "You don't need that," you know, if you went over and complained about anything. So, but every building was the same, and like I said, in the middle here was this nucleus of bathrooms, and what a mess that was. I don't know that we didn't get athlete's feet, or at least something. We didn't get anything bad. I don't know. They had somebody that was supposed to clean it too, but we hardly ever saw them because we were usually at work, you know. But this building to me was so exciting because everybody came through it. The teletype was exciting in that it was important, but that was so much seeing people every day, hundreds of people, you know, talking to everybody. You learn to get over your shyness. I mean, I was like a stupid kid from the coal region. You know, what did I know? I didn't think I knew anything. Oh.
For your 2 jobs that you had at the depot, what kind of training did you have then?
None.
Really?
No, all I had was high school.
Did they train you for the job when you got there?
There wasn't any time. There was no time to train anything. You just did it. I mean, a lot of it was common sense. You know, I mean, when I was home, I did a lot of, I did all my mother and dad's bill paying and all that stuff. I don't know why I was designated. I guess I was the oldest. There were only 2 of us. But they depended on me a great deal, and I mean, I just kind of had that kind of responsibility. I didn't worry about not knowing, and I could type very well. Like, you know what our school did? They required everybody to take typing. Whether it was your course or not, you had to take typing, and I think that was a great thing, you know, because you learn to do it. I'll show you how. Look at these people before we graduated. These people, teachers and so forth, were in the service. There's 2 teachers. These people were in the service before we got out of high school. That's something.
What school did you go to?
Mount Carmel High School.